Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to episode number 2 of Arco Answers. So, though this is technically episode 2, it's really the first time that we've done this live. So, if you have any questions, please use the comment bar over. I think it's over to the right of your screen. But yeah, use the comment bar. Submit any questions you may have, and I will be answering those kind of live throughout this event here. Let me make sure my microphone is actually on. Yes. So hopefully you're hearing me. Um, if you're not, if there's any audio issues, please submit them in the bar to the right as well. So a couple of things I want to go over real quick. So one of the first things that people have asked, why are you doing this? Why are you doing live streaming? And honestly, the easy answer was I've been doing this anyways. People have been calling me somewhat regularly and basically asking questions. And the questions range from, people who have, really, millions of dollars in assets that are in the government occupied space, to people who have a single lease that, has maybe 3,000 square feet, and they just have a quick question. So I'm constantly answering questions related to this topic. So I finally decided, why don't I just do it in a manner that is more helpful to the community, hopefully provides more value. It allows people to ask questions. I can answer the questions live. Hopefully other people will benefit from the conversation. And really it's all about providing value to anyone who comes across this video. So that's kind of the why behind what's going on. The one thing I would say is, if you are interested in this kind of content, I'm going to put up a comment real quick. So that link, hopefully you guys can see it there over to the right. If you like content like this, then what I recommend is going to that link and clicking it. And what's going to do, it's going to take you to our email subscription page. So at the end of every month, it's not a spam email. At the end of every month, I'm going to be sending out an email, and it's basically going to have articles I've written on LinkedIn. It's going to have, these videos once they get turned into videos and recorded on YouTube. So it'll be live for now, and then it'll turn into a video that just stays into on YouTube forever. But so it's articles, it's these videos, and also the other thing is the GOV CRE podcast. This is something else that I've created. So this is intended to be kind of a short form, quick answers to quick questions, platform, and something that's hopefully a little more interactive. But really, if you're looking for long form content, like deep intellectual conversations and answers, then what I recommend you do is go to govcrepodcast.com, the Gov CRE podcast. And that's where I've already have interviewed some fantastic people in this space. The first interview was with Danny Kruger, who runs a building automation, Internet of Things, all things really smarter than I am, company out of California, where they can do great things for your building. So we have a great conversation about creating energy efficiencies and automations in buildings where, typically with government tenants, you do have a higher cost of occupancy with a government tenant than you might otherwise with a normal, commercial tenant. We've had a conversation with Diana Parks Curran, actually two of them. It was a very long conversation that we actually cut into two pieces, and fantastic conversation with her. She's a lawyer who focuses 100% in this space, and just tons of great information came from that. So hopefully you'll get a chance to get over there and check that out as well. So So that's kind of the why I'm doing this, as well as the the I guess the promotion of the other the other avenues where you can find information like this. So we'll be doing the live stream. You can come back to this channel to check out some of the what will in the future be previous videos. Come here to watch them live and participate live, but also get the Gov CRE podcast for the longer format. Um, so while I'm waiting for maybe some questions to come in through the comments, I do want to jump in to some questions that I've gotten recently from clients, and just to kind of get the conversation started. So the first thing, I had the pleasure of going to San Francisco last week and speaking at an event called the National Federal Development Association. It was the San Francisco chapter, and had a chance of sitting on a panel with some other just great guys, and we discussed just kind of the general state of leasing. So I kind of wanted to start there for anyone joining in to the conversation now. So what is like the general state of GSA leasing? Like, what am I seeing, since I live and breathe this stuff every day? So the first thing that I'm seeing is there's a massive shift to either acquisitions through AAAP. And if you're not familiar with what that is, just feel free to reach out to me and we can talk about it. There's also a massive shift to the broker contract, to the utilization of the broker contract. And that it really comes down to GSA has this massive groundswell. It's often referred to as the bow wave of just work that they have to get through over the next coming years. And it's something like 46% of their portfolio is actually expiring over the next few years. And Kurt Stout of Colliers would be probably punching himself right now because I might be misquoting him, but no, there's a huge amount of work that's coming up, and quite frankly, GSA just doesn't have the resources internally to execute on all this work. So you're going to start seeing a lot of AAAP deals. You're going to start seeing a lot of like I said, broker projects rolling out. And what that really is just GSA's attempt to use all the tools at their disposal to get ahead of this work. So so kind of an interesting times there. So the other thing we're seeing is a movement toward longer lease terms. This is great news for everyone, really. So for the government, it means reduced rates. You're getting better terms because you're offering greater cash flow guarantee to owners, and that is rewarded through better terms. Not only when there's a longer lease term in place, the owner is able to obtain better financing, and that better financing then translates into better rental rates for you as well. So a lot of reasons behind why that leads to better terms. I won't get into it all because there's 1,000 reasons, but so that's the benefit to the government. The benefit to the private sector here is you're getting a tenant. I just helped a guy with a deal yesterday, and it's a 20-year firm or 20-year lease, 20 years firm, and it's new construction. And there's while that is kind of the rare unicorn nowadays, in general we are seeing transition to longer lease terms, especially if it's coming through the AAAP system. So AAAP, you're getting 17 years, 15 years firm. You're getting 15 years, 13 years firm, or 10 years, 8 years firm. So those are the kind of the static lease terms that are built into it. But what's really important to notice is that GSA traditionally has almost always, at least as long as I worked there, and even shortly after I left, they always had pretty much a 5-year soft term. And not only did they listen to the private sector, and when the private sector was saying like, look, you don't need to do a 10-year, 5-year firm lease when your average occupancy is over 20 years. That doesn't make sense. But also, do you really need 5 years of flexibility built into the lease? So GSA has listened to that, at least from the AAAP aspect, and that has been turned into shorter soft term periods, which is a fantastic move, and I think something that's going to benefit everyone. So that's looking at some of like the procurement strategy changes that have come along. The other thing I've been seeing a lot is, and maybe this is some holdover from the government shutdown that we experienced, or the partial government shutdown. Um, but the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of is delays. And historically, there's always been post-award delays, and it's kind of the nature of the beast. We just heard. I'll actually be releasing some content on that, here in the near future, of what to do when you find yourself in the situation of a post-award delay. But what I've been seeing a lot of lately is actually pre-award delay. So you submit your final proposal revision, and then it's just crickets. And I mean, like, no exaggeration, months will go by and you don't hear anything. And that's an issue. And when I'm having very candid conversations with people at GSA across the country, because people know that I used to work there, so they feel comfortable talking to me about these things. And what I'm hearing is it's management reviews. It's waiting for sometimes occupancy agreements, but that's usually more of a short-term delay. And if you don't know what occupancy agreements are, again, you can reach out to me and we'll talk about it. But so occupancy agreements, short-term delays, management reviews, very substantial and, in my opinion, unacceptable delays, and also RWA delays. So an RWA is a reimbursable work authorization. So this is basically a check that the agency cuts to GSA so that GSA can then execute the contract, because they know that the tenant improvements in the lease will ultimately exceed the tenant improvement allowance that's provided for in the lease. So that's another thing that I've been seeing is, I mean, some of these RWAs, I mean, at least the story I'm getting is they're taking months and months to get. And I do know that, at least initially, that was partially driven by the partial government shutdown, because even when the government reopened, they were still the financial groups that were still responsible for producing these documents. They were still in a position where they were focusing on how do we finance the next shutdown, vice actually working to keep projects moving. So I'm hoping that's something that goes away in the near future. But as of now, it's still very much an issue, and it has been delaying many of my projects for oh geez. I mean, at least one up to 6 months. I got another one that's probably been delayed 3 or 4 months. And these owners are sitting there holding space available. We haven't found out whether or not we're the winners yet, technically. And in one case we have, because it's through AAAP. So we've already been identified as the lowest price offeror, and we've already gone through due diligence. But this is creating real issues for the ownership community. And this is something that I brought up when, in Region 9, when we were in San Francisco, when the PBS Commissioner, Dan Brown, was in the room, and basically just saying, like, this has to be resolved, whether it's requesting the RWA sooner, putting it somehow earlier in the process so that we're not dealing with this at the point of lease execution. Some process changes need to be made. And it's causing real hardship for the ownership community, and it's kind of a soapbox I've been on, one of my many soapboxes, I guess, related to the space. So the other thing, so that's kind of like a general overview of the current state of GSA leasing that I provided at the NFDA conference in San Francisco last week. So the other question I got, actually just yesterday as well, was regarding interest rates. So a gentleman was considering, I'm submitting my final proposal revision. What interest rate should I be putting forth? And that's a kind of $1 million question. I mean, who knows? I have my own personal thoughts and advice that I give my clients, but the challenge here is, it's not what are interest rates today. It's what will interest rates be at the point that you make the conversion to permanent financing. So, if you already have permanent financing in place in your building, then this may not be such an issue when you're pursuing government work, and really just maybe, what's your cost of the construction loan, or it could be a million variables depending on what your capital structure looks like and your sources of capital. But the issue is GSA is basically saying for many of the lessors out there, hey, give us an interest rate now, at final proposal revisions. And I just told you, we're now seeing months and months of delay after final proposal revisions before you actually receive a signed lease. So you're adding a couple of months on there, and then you're adding a couple of months on for, okay, you've been awarded the lease. Now let's go through the DID process. Let's go through the CD process. And then on top of all of that, now we have to build the space out. And I mean, we could be 2 years out. We could be 2.5 years out. So the question isn't, what are interest rates today? The question is, what are interest rates in 2.5 years? Because that's what you're going to be held to, when you finally make the switch to permanent financing. So it's a really difficult question. So I always tell people, have the conversation with your bank. Yeah, they have to pull out their crystal ball, and everyone has to pull out their crystal ball. And then you're going to have to add some buffer to that, because who knows where interest rates are going to be in 2.5 years. You just look at the end of last year, Fed was increasing rates, 10-year treasuries were ticking up. Everyone was preparing for a 2019 of higher interest rates. And just last week, I think it was maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, the Fed came out and basically formally announced, yeah, we're probably not going to be increasing interest rates this year, this cycle. So, and then, now what we're seeing is we were telling everyone, like, hey, be careful, 10-year treasuries are ticking up. Well, as of last week, they're ticking back down, so if you've been tracking that at all. So it's trying to predict the future in a time where the future is incredibly volatile, and no one has any clue what to expect regarding, with regards to interest rates. So yeah, it's a tough question, but just go into it with the mindset of, when I'm filling out my final proposal revisions and I have to put that amortization rate down, the question isn't, what are interest rates today? What's my ability to finance a project today? It's, what is my cost of capital 1 year, 2 years, almost 3 years out? And that's what you have to be thinking about, and then providing an appropriate cushion so that you're not underwater on the financing. And and then at the same time, you don't want to be overzealous with your cushion, because it's still a competitive procurement. So that's the advice I give to ownership, is have a deep, thoughtful conversation with your bank, and then kind of cross your fingers and hope that you're right. From the GSA perspective, I get it. It's part of the process. It's part of the evaluation. You don't want to get to post award and then find out that, well, this person's offering, the successful party's offering, 15% interest, where you could have got 3% interest, from another party. I get it from the GSA perspective. It's part of your evaluation. Fully understand it. But you also need to understand that, yeah, you're gonna see high interest rates, even though currently they're sitting, 4 or 5%, maybe. That's what I've seen some clients able to get permanent financing at recently. But again, we're not talking about now. We're talking about 3 years potentially in the future. So just be aware of what's going on the other side of the table, the ownership side of the table. This is the difficulty they're dealing with. So that's interest rates. The other thing that came up, kind of during the conversation at the National Federal Development Association, chapter event in San Francisco was, what are, just making sure you're accounting for all expenses. So the GSA has a wonderful form, 1217. I don't even say that sarcastically. I think it's a great form, because what it does is it requires you to think about each line item that's going to be going into your operating rent. So that is your pre-award tool for developing, hey, what are my costs going to be? Well, there's two things that can change that. And it's important to know that you have the ability to change that. So you get into post-award, you've successfully received the lease, and then the government comes to you and says, oh, by the way, hey, change order during construction. Originally, we didn't think we were going to need a generator as an example. But yeah, we're actually going to need a generator now. So what a lot of people will do in that situation is they'll say, all right, well, here's the cost of the generator. Here's what it's going to cost to install it. We got to put a slab in, blah, blah, blah. Here's what that generator is going to cost. Well, what they're not thinking about is, okay, so the government's installing this generator. I'm going to be responsible for the maintenance. What's the ongoing maintenance of that as well? So what I would highly, highly recommend is that anytime you get a change order during the post-award, whether it's design, whether it's construction, something changes. I would say definitely after notice to proceed to begin construction, you get a construction change order. If I didn't make that confusing enough, then don't only think about what are the hard costs to build out what the government's asking for. You need to have your team also thinking about what are the ongoing maintenance costs associated with that item as well. Because what you can do and what you should be doing is saying, all right, here's the hard cost proposal. Oh, by the way, we did our analysis. I know this generator maintenance, to maintain the warranty on it, I have to perform the following maintenance requirements, and we've gotten bids, and that's going to add an additional $2,000 a year to my operating cost. Therefore, I need my operating rent to also go up, 10 cents, 20 cents, whatever that happens to be for your building. So, that's using a generator as an example, but I mean, it could be anything that increases your overall operating cost of the building. That has to be factored in whenever there's a change order. So another one, people are getting a little more savvy to that one. One that I recently used on as we were going through and designing space, an initial, we did the DIDs, we're going through the construction drawings. So keep in mind, you are required to provide your offer on a warm lit shell. All right, so if you don't know what warm lit shell is, look to section 3 of your lease. There's your definition of essentially a warm lit shell. So one thing that, I was working on a project, and during the design phase, we're adding rooms and we're adding, lobby areas, and there's going to be people in the, high traffic, people waiting in the lobbies. So as we went through the design, we realized, okay, so we have the shell requirement. So we need, in this case, let's say 4 rooftop units to provide adequate heating and cooling for the shell space. Well, through the design process, we realized, okay, we're actually going to need a 5th rooftop unit. Not only that, we're going to need some sort of auxiliary cooling to assist with that lobby waiting area. And so when we submitted the TIX package, we had that auxiliary cooling that was added to the tenant improvements, not a shell item. That was a tenant improvement. The fact that we were having to add a 5th rooftop unit, when our shell was based on 4, we had to add a 5th rooftop unit. That becomes a tenant improvement because that was driven by the tenant's requirements, the tenant space requirements. If we were just operating in a warm lit shell, it wouldn't have been required. So it was the tenant's design of the space that led to that 5th rooftop unit. So that was a tenant improvement. So again, going back to what we just talked about, even though that's not a change order, this is something that's coming up during the design process. What we submitted was, okay, here's the tenant, or here's the TIX package. It contains, these 2 other items you may have questions about, and we addressed them in the submittal of the TIX package. This is why you're paying for a rooftop unit. This is why you're paying for this auxiliary cooling unit in the lobby area. But we also said, hey, look, these were not contemplated when we were putting together our original 1217. these were not contemplated when we were coming up with what it's going to cost to operate this building. And this is something that I think hardly anybody catches. I mean, there may be incredibly sophisticated groups out there that are, that are already doing this stuff. But if you're hearing this for the first time, please, please, please implement this approach, because the government is increasing your costs through their design. You now have an additional rooftop unit to maintenance. You now have this new auxiliary unit that you're going to be maintaining as well. So we submitted the TICS package. I think I've said that about 10 times now. The joy of being live. And then on top of that, we submitted a request for equitable adjustment in order to increase the operating rent, to account for the maintenance of those two items that were not included in the basic warm lit shell. So, it's kind of maybe a pro tip there. So even as you're going through design, if you're having to reconfigure your building above and beyond the warm lit shell in a way that increases your cost, do not be afraid to submit a request for equitable adjustment, and it should not be unduly withheld. So if that's something you're interested in discussing more, feel free to give me a call. Because that is a lengthier process. It's a lengthier conversation on how to go about executing that. But what I will say is in that example, actually in both examples, in the change order example and in the design change example, we were successful. The ownership team was successful in both those situations, and it's because we presented an argument. We presented it logically. We backed up our request for equitable adjustment with actual quotes. We showed that there's no cushion in these numbers. The government's changes have driven these, or will drive these increases to operating rent. We were just open, transparent. We spoke their language, and because of that, the government, I would say, basically didn't even hesitate to approve the increases to the operating rent. So that's all I got. We didn't get any questions in the comment section today, but I wanted to have those those at least a couple of questions available that I've received recently, so that I could address them here in just kind of a more long-term format. So again, couple of calls to action. The link, you should see a link over here, I believe. I don't know, first time I'm doing this. We'll see when I watch the video and replay if I'm pointing the right way. But if you click on that link, it'll actually take you to a landing page where you could subscribe to our email list. And again, let's say you can't catch these events live. Well, then, I will send them to you at the end of every month, once they've been, oh, hey, Luke. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that. So, hey, got a comment. That's always, it's always good to know that folks are out there and engaged. So, yeah, sign up for the mailing list there. Also, if you don't like getting email, which I understand, you can just follow me on LinkedIn at @tchadbecker. The same comment I'll send you, or the content I'll send you in the email in a more consolidated format, I will kind of piecemeal as I'm sending stuff out and creating the content. I'll put it on LinkedIn, and that's it. So this was the first live event. I hope the audio worked. I hope hope the video came through fine. I'm already have plans to work on the content delivery, making it look a little nicer. You won't be looking at my bookshelf here in the future. There's going to be actually something a little better to look at in the future, and maybe some better cameras and whatever. But hope you enjoyed it. If you're watching this later on, please leave comments. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Sign up for the email list, and yeah, we'll be in touch. So we're at our 30-minute mark just about. So thank you for joining, and we'll do this again next Wednesday. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.